Presentation will begin momentarily.
You guys ready? I can introduce myself, it's fine.
Right on.
So good morning, I'm Megan Ferguson, and this is Commas Kill, Writing Better for Analysts. I want to thank BSides for taking a chance on having a tech writer present something. I think it's not something you guys normally get, and I really appreciate it. I am a technical writer at the National Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Center, and I have years of experience working with analysts and cybersecurity reports. I do not have years of experience speaking in public, so I appreciate you bearing with me because I'm terrified right now. This is a very big room. So I'm very lucky. I like cybersecurity. I like working with analysts, and I like writing. So I'm pretty much in the perfect job. I developed this presentation because writing well is no longer optional. Not only are analysts expected to analyze malware, perform incident response, but they're also expected to write stellar reports. The cost of submitting a bad report or a bad product to a customer is they may choose not to work with you again, which can affect your livelihood. You may lose credibility with your customer and your peers for something that, it could have been fixed. This presentation gives you some tools to improve your products, maybe even make it easier for you to write them. And I'd like to start by addressing the title of my presentation, Commas Kill, with a really stupid joke. A panda walks into a bar. He eats a sandwich. He shoots the waiter. The bartender shouts, "Hey, where are you going? You just shot my waiter and you didn't even pay for your sandwich." The panda yells at the bartender, "I'm a panda. Look it up." Bartender opens his dictionary and sees the definition of a panda bear. Eats, shoots, and leaves. In this case, the comma really did kill. Next slide. So this presentation will cover the following information: how to organize your data, how to support your analysis, how to avoid common mistakes, and if you're lucky enough to have them, how to work with technical writers. So, next. Yep. So before you begin writing, I like to have you start with 3 simple steps. You need to consider your audience. Who is your intended audience, the audience of the product? Is it fellow analysts? Is it C-suite executives? Or the general public, which is actually worst of all? Second, define the document's purpose. What are you trying to accomplish? What is the document supposed to do? Are you providing information to help leadership make decisions? Informing analysts on something you've observed? Reporting findings from an engagement or assessment? The purpose of your product will really help you figure out how to write it. Especially for unique products, I like to put the purpose statement at the top of my report while I'm working on it. So if I get off on a tangent, I can revisit it when I open the document and think, all right, I really didn't need that information in there. Then the last is choose the vehicle, by which I mean the type of product. Does your organization have templates? If so, you should probably use them. Your technical writers will thank you. You'll be a hero. Templates can often narrow down the purpose of your product and your audience, because specific products go to specific audiences. The type of product needs to work with your intended audience. So a report going to leadership should have an executive summary, so that should be something that your template has. Fellow analysts want technical and analytical details, and the general public does not want technical details at all. They just want attribution, but that's a different presentation. To help you remember these 3 things, I worked very hard to come up with some acronyms. The first one is APV, Audience, Purpose, Vehicle. When you're thinking of it, you remember the alligator on the ATV. You wonder what it stood for. You probably revisit this talk because you just remember the alligator, and there you go. The second one I made up for you is like the old Batman episodes, VAP, Vehicle, Audience, Purpose. I've been thinking of this stuff for about a month, and this is the best I could come up with, so I appreciate your kindness about these. All right, now we're going to go into the next slide, the camel with 3 humps. So when I started writing my PhD, my advisor told me that basically any document is a camel with 3 humps. The first hump is the introduction. You tell the audience what you are going to tell them. The second hump is the main body. You tell them what you are telling them. And the third hump is the conclusion. You tell the audience what you've told them. As analysts, you should be spending most of your time on the main body. Your findings, your observations, and analysis are the meat of the report. So, next slide. Your first draft is the first pancake. Why is it the first pancake? It's not ready for prime time. Do not give this pancake to Gordon Ramsay. He will fire you. So, first thing I ask you to do is start early, edit often, but I'd honestly be happy as a technical writer if you did more than 1 draft. That would do it for me. As a student, I would write papers the night before they were due. I'm sure that a lot of you did that. As a teacher, I told my students I could tell if they wrote papers the night before they were due, because I could. If you send your first and only draft straight to the customer, they're going to be able to tell that this is your first pancake. You guys are lucky in one way. Analysts write reports once they complete the work. So you do the fun stuff. You generally know your conclusions before you even touch the product. You just have to write it, which is the part that kills. The purpose of the first draft is to exist. Don't sweat it too much, just get started on it. It doesn't matter. I mean, with computers, you can change anything, not like the word processor that I used when I was in college. But the biggest point I want to make to you, if you don't listen to any of the other stuff I've said, is always write the introduction last. Cannot emphasize it enough. Introduction last. First of all, you're going to get hung up on it because you don't know what you're saying before you've written it. Second of all, you can't tell the audience what you're going to tell them unless you've already told them the thing. So, introduction last. Sometimes a first draft just doesn't work. It sucks. If your product is just not gelling, something's wrong, it's not going very well, and you know it's not just that you hate writing. You need to remember the alligator and go back to APV. You may need to reassess the audience, the purpose, or the vehicle, and that may help you with the next draft. A couple other things to consider in your first draft. What does the audience really care about? This is different for different audiences. You know, the C-suite executives are not going to care about the same thing as the general public, and the analysts are definitely not going to be interested in either of those two things. Will you need to provide narration through a step-by-step process? For example, maybe you're on an incident response engagement. First you arrive on site, then you meet with the customer. Eventually you deploy host-based agents. If you're going to have to step-by-step a narrative process, what level of detail are you going to provide the audience? Decide roughly how detailed you want to be. It'll save you some time later. Next slide. So, organizing your data. Over here you'll see this is just a rough outline of a paper, a report, any report. So, after thinking about the audience, purpose, and vehicle, you need to start thinking about how to organize your data. And I'm going to tell you about 2 different ways, very basic ways to organize your data. The first is organizing by chronology, and that will include your step-by-step processes. The second is grouping similar data together. If you're organizing things chronologically, maybe you're writing an incident response report that requires a narrative of the threat actor activity that was observed. It makes sense to present this information in the order it happened, rather than in the order in which you discovered it. So you might not know exactly what the threat actor was doing in order. You're going to find it in different ways. You want to present it in your report in the order in which they did it. It'll be easier for your audience to follow. First, you would provide details on the threat actor using compromised credentials, for example. and then how the actor used those credentials to complete certain actions, all in chronological order. Second example, you're writing about a tool like JexBoss. The report would likely start with an executive summary and introductory materials, so people know what they're getting into. Maybe they then take a break. Then it would take the reader through how the tool works, step by step. If you're interested in JexBoss, the US CERT website has an analysis report on how JexBoss works. The other thing is grouping similar data together. Grouping like data together helps the reader process it. Again, in an incident response report, it makes sense to put information about the tools you used together. Second example, information on deploying sensors, put them in the same section. Even if you're working across a couple different sites, different networks, the deployed sensors need to be grouped together so that the information on the sensor deployment makes sense to the person reading the report. If you show them in the chronological order when you deployed the sensors, it's not going to make much sense, and they're going to forget. Reports can definitely use both of these techniques. Finally, even if you don't know which organizational technique you want to use, developing an outline is important. An outline is just a rough guide, gives you the idea of how you want to organize your report. You can start by sketching out section headings, and it doesn't need to be perfect. It's probably definitely going to change. I always say you need to make a plan so you can change a plan. You can't change something that doesn't exist. You need to have an outline to change an outline. I have even used outlines in my report, put them in the first draft, and then written my report by filling in the information for the different headings. And then if it doesn't work, rearrange it. All right, so next slide is very important to me. And this is, plagiarism is the enemy. I can't emphasize it enough what being accused of plagiarism could do to your career and your credibility. You must give credit for ideas and information that are not yours. If you take credit for someone else's work, either by ignorance, you didn't know that you took credit for their work, laziness, it's too much work to provide your sources, or just willfully, people will find out. It's especially embarrassing if the author of the product finds out that you plagiarized them, because they will take to Twitter about it. So I was going to bore you to death until a friend helped me with this slide. I was going to explain how and when to cite sources, and you all would have had a really good nap before lunch, believe me. What's most important is to credit the sources you use. It can be very simple. Simplest thing, provide a link to the source. Up in the toolbar, if you use Windows, which you probably hate, click References, footnote or endnote, put the link in there. That's it. If you have a technical writer, they will figure out the rest. I've done that before. Don't get hung up on how your footnotes or endnotes are formatted. Even just providing the simple link is better than nothing. And there are even free programs that format citations for you. They're called bibliography generators. You put in the link, and it fills in the rest of the information. An example is EasyBib, but I looked it up, there's more. Oh, these two guys know what I'm talking about. Some people worry that listing a lot of sources makes your report look weak. It doesn't. This gibberish is one of the pages of my thesis, where I cited a whole ton of sources. There's some that are longer. Like long division, showing your sources is showing how you came to your conclusions. You just want to show people that you've done the work so they can see how you got there. You will not be graded on this. Next will be avoiding common mistakes. And like the bibliography slide, this was going to bore you to death. But I changed it. So if you're bored now, that's your own fault. When I started writing, my thesis advisor complained that I was writing small. I knew what I was talking about. I knew what my analysis was. I could see my conclusions coming a mile away. But the way I wrote it, my readers could not necessarily make the same connections. And that's what I call writing small. You need to write big. Writing big is explaining everything and being super detailed. Think of it again as showing your work. You need to explain the ideas that your audience may not immediately understand. even if they're intelligent people. You can always edit it later. Second thing, and you will hear this if you have a technical writer, is using active voice. First of all, what is active voice? Active voice clearly explains who is doing the action. For example, the team analyzed the malware, not the malware was analyzed. The team reviewed the logs to identify anomalous activity, not the logs were reviewed for anomalous activity. And no matter what you get out of this talk, this will make it worthwhile. This one thing. To identify passive voice, if you can say the phrase in question followed by the phrase, by zombies, it's passive voice. So, the malware was analyzed by zombies. Yep. The logs were reviewed for anomalous activity by zombies. Both passive. And it's worth your money, basically, by zombies. So, analysts do not always have to use active voice. So that grammar squiggle that you see on Word, turn it off. Well, I mean, don't turn the spelling one off, just the grammar one. Sometimes passive voice is just going to work better for you guys. You use it when you're drawing focus to the thing affected by the action. It can be used when you're not sure what is causing the action. So, example. The signatures were used until it was determined they were a false positive, or they were creating a false positive. This focuses on the signatures, not the intrusion detection system or the team. The malware was submitted for analysis in June 2018. Maybe you don't know who submitted it. You don't know where it came from. Last of all, be specific. Being specific is different than explaining everything. If your report uses a word or a phrase that could mean different things to different people, provide a specific definition for that word. Example, malware variants and malware families. I cannot tell you how many of my friends and coworkers I have asked, well, what's the difference to you between a malware variant and a malware family? I've gotten a different answer every time. So, if you know what you're talking about, put something in there that explains it to the reader, because they may have a very different idea. If you find that adding the explanation into the text or a citation is awkward, consider using a glossary so that the reader can just go to the bottom, see what you're saying, go back up, they're good. Always provide specific dates and specific numbers, and then double check them. For example, let's say you are on an incident response engagement and you have sensors. In the introduction, you explain that you have 2 sensors on a network, but later on you say that you have 5 sensors total. Why is there a difference? People are going to notice, so be sure to double check. All right, next slide. Yes. You know, we're not allowed cameras at work, so. If you're working with technical writers, if you're lucky enough to have a technical writer, there's a couple of things I want to tell you from the technical writer perspective. It is absolutely not personal. You will feel like it is, but it's not. The changes and suggestions that a technical writer makes to your report, they're just trying to make your report stronger and make you look better. It will feel personal, it is absolutely not, and a good technical writer will rip your report apart. There are 2 types of technical writers in cybersecurity. There are ones that like cybersecurity and technology and are interested in it, and they'll research it on their own time, and there are ones that don't. Both types can help you with your report. They are there to help you. You just get different stuff from different people. Their review is going to help you make your analysis clearer and more concise. They just want you to look good. If possible, especially when you're working on something for the first time, meet with your technical writer. It's going to help establish the tone of voice and the working relationship you have with them, especially if you're going to read their horrible comments to you later. If you can tell them about the type of product and the audience and the purpose when you meet with them, they're going to be able to help you more when they're reviewing your work. They may have useful suggestions for you. Anything you tell them will help them. And if you can't meet, Try to provide this kind of information when you're submitting your email to the technical writer. Just give them a heads up. Here's where I was thinking, here's where I was going. It'll help them help you. For the love of God, spell out your acronyms. I am a wizard with Google. I can find anything, but I might find the wrong thing, and I'm going to put it in there. If the technical writer is not sure what you're talking about, it may impact their edits, making them less clear or even wrong. Just, spell it out. If you're lucky, your technical writer will do the acronym list for you, but they have to be very well paid in sodas. Answer questions that your technical writer asks you. If they ask you questions, it means they're engaged and they're reading for content, not just where they want to put the comma. The answers are going to help them the answers are going to help them learn more for next time. Hopefully, they won't have to ask you the same thing twice. Your readers may have similar questions to the one your technical writer is asking. So by answering their questions and having them edit your work, you are heading your reader off at the pass. Review the edits your technical writer gives you. Don't blindly accept them. I know it is very easy. Just one click and all that is gone. You may catch grammatical changes that introduce errors in your work. So the technical writer may be focused on making things sound right, but they may make your content wrong. You need to catch that, or you're going to look silly. If you review the changes in the comments from your technical writer, you may learn some things that make it easier for you to write your next report. You may also not repeat your mistakes, so you're both learning from each other. It's a symbiotic relationship. They're getting more on the cybersecurity knowledge side, you're getting a little bit more on the writing side. Next slide. Work smart. I cannot tell you enough how reading makes your writing better. Read anything, whatever interests you. I don't care. Just read, and read a lot. It will make you a better writer. You'll just know what sounds right. It'll just make sense to you when you're reading it. Take notes as you work on a project. Use whatever format works for you for the notes. Paper notebook, Word document, spreadsheet. Just take notes. The purpose of good notes is to make it easier for you to write your report. You won't have to scramble through old emails. You won't have to search for that article you read 6 months ago that you kind of remember but don't really. You don't have time for that. Your notes are going to help you remember sources and information, and it's very important. So for me, I create a dedicated document each time I work on a project. And this is killing me. I create a dedicated document, and I save direct quotes from the source with no paraphrasing. I know that these are direct quotes, and so I don't have to worry about misquoting something or being accused of plagiarism because I've done my work. I know exactly what the quote says. The other thing about notes is they can help you remember your thoughts while you're working on a project. A lot of times I can't remember what I was doing and I make a list. The same thing for notes. You are going to have some brilliant analytical insights. And if you don't note them down, you may forget them. You're going to make connections. You just need to keep it all in one place. Yes. Reduce, reuse, and recycle. This is something people are not going to tell you. You can reuse your standard language. You define something once, you can use that definition until it changes or until you feel like changing it. I developed a document with the best versions of standard language from reports. And then when someone had a less good version, I just popped that standard version in there. I was ready to go. You can do the same thing. You find something you like, you can reuse that language. Not plagiarizing, your own work. All right. Always provide the so what. So, I was working on my thesis, and my advisor would return the chapters that I wrote with blood, sweat, and tears. And he would write so what in the margins of nearly every page. It was his shorthand way of saying, why are you providing this information? What is the significance? What does it mean for your analysis? You're always providing stuff because it supports your analysis. You need to give your reader the so what. Why are you including it? Why is it important? You may think your analysis is basic, that anyone can see it coming, but your audience might not see the connections, so you're going to have to state it for them. Editing your work or having a peer review of your work is also very important. It is awful. It is gut-wrenching. It feels like you are handing off your baby to someone and you are not sure if they are a serial killer. Do it anyway. Colleagues can help you identify gaps in your analysis. They can bring things to you that you haven't thought of. I mean, think about how boring this talk would be if I had not listened to my friend. It's better to receive criticism and feedback before your product is released than after it is, because people on the internet are not kind. And finally, good enough is good enough. Theoretically, as you identify new information, you could keep working on a report forever. Sometimes it's hard to close a report and say it's done. Do it anyway. You can release an update or an updated version whenever. Sometimes you just have to say, I'm done with this, I'm going to go ahead. So, slide, please. Remember these things: audience, purpose, and vehicle. Write your introduction last. Write big, be detailed, be specific, and please, do not plagiarize. Reference your sources. So the next slide is questions. I'm actually developing a blog to go with this talk, and you can find it at commaskill.blogspot.com. I just put up the first post yesterday. You're going to have more information. And I'm on Twitter, which I'll tell you about the blogs as they're posted if you're interested in that kind of thing. So that was it.